But the important part of that whole journey was that I met my wife there. And as I was sharing this earlier, meeting Renee was one of the most important parts of my life. It's led me to the faith journey that I'm on today. She is a huge part of my conversion and my whole faith journey. And anyway, we met in 80. We would date for 5 years, got married in 1985 at Church of the Ascension. And great day, May 31st. We'll be celebrating 39 years this coming May. And she is a treasure, and she is a gift to me. And we were blessed to have 4 children, gifted with 4 children, three sons and a daughter. And fortunately, they all live here close by. I mean, they're all within about a half-hour range from us, so it's great. And they've produced children, and so now we have 10 grandchildren, which is really a blessing. I mean, so our children, our grandchildren are here, and it's wonderful, and we're blessed in so many ways. Through those years of raising our children and helping at times, and I emphasize helping raise our grandchildren. We'll never be the ones to raise them, but we always enjoy being with them and helping our children. But going through those years of watching our children and just witnessing their growth, their maturity, their relationship with Christ has had a profound impact on both my wife and I. And so much so, watching them, and especially in Bob and Steve and others will be able to really relate to this, but watching them in the youth group, watching them grow into their individual faith lives, seeing all that take place, and then witnessing that today and watching how that all sort of transcended into their own marriages and their children and bringing them into the faith. It's really been wonderful to watch, and we're so blessed. And we know that's, and we don't take that lightly either, because we witness what's happened in the world. And so anytime we see something with our children, something that demonstrates their faith, and whether it's a sacrament or whether we're either witnessing or in some cases even participating in some of the sacraments, I've been able to baptize 2 of my grandchildren. Just being able to do that is such a blessing. Words can't even describe it. I could say it all day, but it was just something special about that. It led me back in the, I guess maybe 10 years ago or so, and Bob was mentioning this before, that I had been thinking about the diaconate for quite some time, and pondering over it, and even before the official discernment, if you will, just had been thinking about it, been talking to fellow Catholics and Catholic men, and getting that nudge from time to time. And there were just so many people that I've talked to that helped me realize that diaconate and being a servant leader was where God was calling me. It took quite some time to really realize that, but it happened. And this was 2015, 2016 or so. I actually started the formation in 2016 officially. And wow, what a mission, what a journey that has been. I mean, you look at your life in so many different ways and perspectives, and you tend to look at those in terms of again, either individual journeys or sometimes chapters in a book. I mean, these are all things that you kind of look at, and wow, it's just it's incredible the paths that you take on and that God leads you in, and that path of the diaconate was really amazing. And it took me right up to 2021. I was ordained September 25th, 2021. And wow, there I was, a deacon at Ascension along with 3 other deacons. So now we have 4. But it wasn't maybe a month or 2 that I had been ordained and was just starting to get my feet wet. And it was, I'm going to kind of fast forward things a little bit, it was Thanksgiving of 2021, the week leading up to Thanksgiving, that I became very ill. As some of you may or may not know, I tend to spend some time outdoors, exercising, doing a lot of activities, physical activities. So I've always made physical fitness a priority, and anyway, so it's been a big part of my life. But I've stayed healthy for, generally speaking, the balance of my life. But there's an exception to that. That week leading up to Thanksgiving in 2021, I became very ill. And it was a mystery illness because we really could not figure out what in the world I had, but it was something that would be comparable to, not necessarily COVID, although we were in COVID mode at that time. I had flu-like symptoms and things that just threw me for a loop. I was very ill. I was pretty much bedridden for a whole week, and I thought I was going to get over it, and but I didn't. And it was Thanksgiving Day, and this has never happened in my life, but I literally ate nothing on Thanksgiving. All I did was drink water. I was that sick, and so this flu or virus, whatever it was that I had, really just threw me for a loop. The very next day, the day after Thanksgiving, I looked at Renee and I said, Renee, I need to go to the hospital. I said, it's time. I mean, I knew myself well enough that this has never happened. And I said, so will you take me? And she did. And so that begins a really interesting story that I'm going to share. And Bob had asked me at our last retreat to maybe share a little bit of an in-depth story about this. So it's an interesting story, I think, and it's one that helps better describe to my faith and my faith journey, and I think you'll see. But the day that I was taken to the hospital, it turns out that I had a condition known as myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart. And we didn't know it right away. The doctors didn't know it right away, but it took a couple of hours. They ran me through some tests. And then finally, one of the local cardiologists there at the Virginia Beach Sentara Hospital checked me out. By this point, I was probably pretty heavily sedated, so I didn't even really know what was going on. That's how bad it was. But Renee would discover, my wife would discover, that I had this condition known as myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart. And I was so sick that they immediately at that hospital said, well, we need to send him to a heart hospital. He needs to go to Norfolk right away. And so, I mean, once they figured out what it was, I was there. They sent me an emergency vehicle, and I was in Norfolk. And that was the day after Thanksgiving. This is still that day after Thanksgiving. When I got there, not only did they determine that and confirm I had myocarditis, but they also said that I was a candidate for a heart replacement. They said that my heart wasn't probably going to make it, and that they had already made contacts up to Richmond at the Medical College of Virginia, or VCU, to arrange for me to get another heart. And I mean, to this day, it's still shocking that things went that fast, that bad. But they did. And my wife, God bless her, and my children, they were right there with me, trying to figure out what to do, what to make of all this. And in those moments, and this is uncharted territory for just about anybody, especially our family, Renee talked to the cardiologist, and he had said to her, I think that your husband needs to do this. I think we need to fly him up to Richmond, and that's what we'll do. We'll fly him up there, and to get a heart replacement. And for either through luck or what have you, I was considered to be a good candidate for this because I guess they felt that, well, this guy's relatively young, and I emphasize relatively, but anyway, that he would be a good candidate for this. But there was a big holdup, and the big holdup was that the insurance company, we were with Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, and we still are today, said, well, not so fast. There's some approvals that have to be given first before you can do any of this. And so my wife was in a real quandary. She was just on pins and needles about what to do. And so the insurance company did not approve that right away and said that we need to get back to you. And because this was happening over a weekend, there wasn't a whole lot of people to consult with, and said, we're going to let you know something around Monday. And so she's thinking, geez, what are we going to do here? And the cardiologist said, well, look, we're going to, we have some alternative things that we can do to keep your husband's heart going. Okay, so they did. And they used they tried a device just to keep my heart function and everything going. I'm going to use this term loosely because I'm not sure medically this is the correct term, but I believe they call this device something like an empress or something that goes into your body. They insert it, and they insert it into my lower extremity, and that would help to sustain some of my heart functions. It was simply a temporary measure, and that was it. And they tried that. They tried that for that weekend, because remember, this is still the weekend after Thanksgiving. It really wasn't successful. They inserted it, but it just wasn't really doing its job. Now, I will tell you at this point, my heart, they call it the, let's see, it's extraction, it's, yeah, they call
ejection fraction.
I'm sorry, ejection fraction, thank you. It was all the way down to 10%.
Ooh.
10%. Now, for comparison, a normal is between 55 and 70. Mine was 10. So my heart's not pumping very well at this point. And the doctor was concerned. He was concerned, A, because if I was a candidate for the heart transplant, they needed to do it now. B, whatever they were using wasn't working very well. So towards the end of that weekend, they made a decision. They gave Renee and our children, and again, at this point I'm heavily sedated, some options of what to do. The next option was to use this machine called an ECMO machine. And an ECMO machine will simulate your heart and actually will keep your heart going. It can, and it's designed ideally to help sustain your heart for at least a couple, 2-3 days, at least that long, if not longer. And when they decided to do this, with my wife's consent, the doctor had said, we'll try this, but there's no guarantee, but this will at least help until we get some answers back from your insurance company and all that. Well, it was over the course of the weekend that they installed this system. They hooked me up to it and had all kinds of, you can imagine all the lines that they had hooked up to this machine. and I'm really not very, I'm barely conscious. I mean, I don't really know a whole lot of what's going on at this point. But they use this machine, and all the while this is happening, I'm purposely leaving out a major component, but there was a considerable amount of praying, praying over me, praying with me, praying from afar. There was an infinite number of people who were praying for me, and I can tell you to this day, I still feel those prayers, but there was so many people that reached out to my wife and to my children, and to me indirectly, and I say indirectly because, again, I wasn't really that conscious of what was going on, but spiritually I could feel that. When the 2 or 3 days had passed with this ECMO machine, there was a really critical decision that had to be made. It looked as though the heart transplant wasn't going to happen And I don't know if it was just out of frustration that we weren't getting any answers from the insurance company, or it looked like this ECMO machine was starting to work. But what ended up happening was this ECMO machine actually started to bring up all of my vitals back to where they were supposed to be in a matter of a couple of days. And the doctors were pretty shocked by that. Not so much that it helped sustain me, because they figured it would at least do that, but things started to really progress well in a couple of days. And this wasn't without a great deal of praying. There were so many people that were with me, and I still have these vivid memories of Father Daniel and the late Father Charles Brindle, who was the spiritual director to me for years. I still have these visions, and I still have this recall of them coming in and praying over me. It was very, very powerful. All during that time that we were waiting for things to kind of work themselves out and settle out. So probably around day 3 of this ECMO machine, the doctor, the cardiologist, the lead cardiologist, Dr. Barrero, got with my wife and said to Renee, I don't quite know how to explain this to you. And I think she had a big lump in her throat because she wasn't sure what was going to follow. But he said to her something that really resonated, and that was, look, we don't know how much longer this ECMO machine is going to be able to carry on your husband's heart functions. I mean, things are getting better, but we're not sure how long this is going to go. We would hope that it continues, but you might want to go ahead and contact all your really your husband's family and friends, and just let them know that we're at a critical juncture right here. And so that was that was a very difficult time for her. But she endured that, and so did we. Obviously up here, but what would end up happening is that probably about the 3rd or 4th day, and after I'd been with this myocarditis machine, which sort of became my good buddy, really good buddy. It looked as though I'd reached a couple of really critical milestones, positive milestones. My ejection fraction had come up to a really respectable number. My oxygen levels had returned to some great places, great measurements, and things were improving now. So I was getting better and better and better. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the cardiologist said to Renee, I don't know how this has happened. This is still kind of new to us. I mean, we're still trying to get a feel for whether this machine is going to be able to take over. But it looks as though that your husband is coming out of this, and we're going to put this whole transplant idea on hold. We're just going to kind of let that sit off to the side for a while. We'll table that one, and we think this machine has taken over. And not only that, but we're also thinking that we'll be able to take him off this machine. It looks like his vitals are all coming back nicely, and they did. I mean, it's truly miraculous. But after probably what ended up being about 4 or 5 days, I started to come around. I could feel myself eventually starting to realize what was happening and what was going on, and it truly was amazing. As that was occurring, there was a particular night that remains pretty well etched in my mind, just like some of the other things I was explaining, and that was that I told you about this Empress device they had put in. I mean, they had put that in, and then they had removed it by the time they had created this ECMO alternative for me. But where they had put this device in my body and where they had removed it, they had stitched me up. And one of the evenings that I was starting to improve and get better, I noticed that I started to bleed, in this particular area one night, and it happened in the middle of the night. It was maybe 12, 1 o'clock, which to me, when you're in the hospital and you're in there for days and days and days, that they all run together, but it was nighttime. And I had this very profound moment that occurred after this, again, this sutured area where this device was, where somehow it had breached a little bit there, and I started to bleed, and I pulled on the chain there. The nurse came in, and they sent the emergency people in there because I was bleeding pretty profusely. I mean, much more so, I think, than they had expected. And I'm not sure if it was because every night around, or every morning around 3 o'clock, they came in and they had their requirements to check vitals and clean me and all that. So I think it was probably during one of those episodes that this happened. But anyway, I was bleeding pretty profusely. Well, they had to bring in a special team to come in there and take care of me. And I'll never forget this, they brought in this, what looks like a C-clamp that came in that would close that wound up and make it firm enough in there that it would not bleed anymore. Well, to stop bleeding, and for anybody that knows anything about medicine, I mean, even if you know just a little bit, if something's bleeding and you're going to clamp it up, you have to clamp it up with a significant amount of pressure. And that clamp has to be so tight that it's going to completely stop that bleeding. Well, the pressure from that clamp around that sutured area, around that wound, was so intense. It's the greatest amount of pain I've ever experienced in my life. It was just agonizing. Isn't even, I mean, that's not even the right word, but it was very intense. I didn't know how I was going to actually get through that, because when they told me they were putting that clamp on me, the technician said, "Sir, this is going to be on you for the next 3 to 6 hours until it stops bleeding." 3 to 6 hours. Now, you think about that right now, this moment, I look at it and go, oh yeah, 3 to 6 hours. No, 3 to 6 hours, that was an eternity. I couldn't even, it just, when he told me that, I felt like the end of the world there. And that's the moment and I know I've spent a long time talking about everything up to this point, but the moment I'm about to explain is probably the most spiritually profound time that I had while I was in the hospital, because as I was experiencing this pain, something that I'd never ever gone through in my entire life, I found myself knowing that it was just me and that they were going to leave me. And they told me that once they put this clamp, that they were going to just disappear and you're going to be on your own for many, many hours. And again, they had told me 3 to 6 hours. I thought, this is not good, and I don't know how I'll get through this. Well, it was at that point where, and I know Father Charles, who again was the spiritual director, he often reminded me of things that were painful at times for him and things that I might endure that were painful. He always reminded me of John 3:30, and increasing him and decreasing me, and just realizing that God has everything in the palm of his hands. I reflected on that scripture, and during that time, as I was sort of pondering over that and thinking about Christ and thinking about my relationship to Christ and the ultimate sacrifice, and thinking about God and his sacrifice of his Son to us for all of humanity, and thinking about my little speck, and I think as Tony had mentioned it before, my being maybe just a grain of sand, one grain of sand in God's giant ocean, that here I was in what I thought was agonizing pain, and thinking to myself, oh, I mean, I was just absolutely, utterly beside myself and just kind of writhing in pain and everything. But at that time, when I was trying to rationalize all this, I was praying so deeply and I was so connected to Christ at that time that I literally found myself asking Christ to help me understand and share with me, if he had wanted, if it was his will, to share with me just an ounce of the pain that he suffered for us. I sort of implored him to do that for me so that I could experience that. And you know what? He gave it to me. he really did. It was. I mean, I was probably wallowing, screaming, crying, everything else in those moments, all by myself. All by myself, but with Christ. And it was such a powerful experience. I mean, it was just us. It was just us. And we talk sometimes, or we discuss redemptive suffering, and we think about suffering and trying to experience or even get a sense of what other people are experiencing. Two of my grandchildren that I'm very close to, Andrew Joseph and Maria Isabella, both born with spina bifida, who are in wheelchairs and will be most likely for their entire lives. They go through pain and suffering like that every day of their lives. And they were not first and foremost, but they were central to that pain and that suffering that I was experiencing, what little that I was experiencing, and trying to understand what other people might be experiencing in their lives, and how what I was experiencing maybe was actually a gift. And it may not have felt that way at that exact moment, but I came to find out that suffering can be, could be, should be thought of as a gift, in the sense of maybe understanding better about that sacrifice, that ultimate sacrifice that was made for us. And that carried me through that 3 to 5 hour period, because when I finally woke up and that pain had actually subsided, it was probably 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, which meant that I went through that period, that pain, for, again, it could have been 3 to 7, 3 to 8 o'clock. It was a long, long period of time with a lot of work and a lot of time with Christ that I'll never forget. And it was that period of time, that moment, when I finally came out of that. I knew then that, just having been ordained as a deacon, and I had this conversation with Christ. Christ, I'm here for you. I'm an extension to you. I'm here to imitate you. I'm here to be a servant. I'm here to be a soldier for you. If you want me to do this, if you want me to continue, you'll show me if this is what you want me to do. And he showed me, and I'm here. And it was truly a blessing. And I ended up probably within 3 to 4 days after that getting released, and it was so, the recovery and the improvement, the progress was so strong and so effective that I was probably, I think they call it a step down when you go from the intensive care unit to the next one and then to the final room. I made that transition so quick that I don't even remember being in the step down room very long. I was back into the regular room and I was released, and I was out. I think my total time in the hospital was about 10 days, but I came out in the December 10th time frame, 2021, and came back to Ascension, and was back on the altar, and I think it was right after Christmas I came back. So just a truly miraculous story, a gift. That miracle was a gift. A gift because You hear this often, but a miracle is where humanity meets divinity. And friends, I'm here to tell you, the two met, the two kissed in that hospital. And I'm living proof of it. And very happy, very delighted, and very blessed to say that.